Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to Bandits Ballads. It's been a while since the last episode, huh? That damn review was an absolute pain to put together, but now that it's finished, let's get back to something simpler. As always, we must begin with a brief recap. Our hero started from this, and now looks like this. But he still has a lot left to accomplish before he can hang his sword and finally rest. When we last saw Balon Blacktyde, he was bullying some town merchants into paying him a proper amount of money for the stolen gear he sold them, and now he stands nice and pretty with over 500,000 dinars overflowing his pockets. That bullying actually consisted of doing a favor for a local artisan by illegally transporting his goods into another city, despite everyone else's protests. And while helping others is a bit uncharacteristic for an Ironborn, whose only life philosophy is to take what he wants from others by force, he did what he did for selfish reasons because, you see, he already took what he wanted from all the battles and raids he's conducted. This little errand simply made sure that he gets paid handsomely for his efforts. Anyway, the reason I mention this is because Sir Blacktyde has been consistently keeping his word to people, even when it didn't directly benefit him, and as a result, he no longer has the reputation of being deceitful. If he keeps doing this, he may even become the first honorable bandit in Calradian history. But enough about the recent past. Let's focus on the present. So what do I have? Money? Check. Manpower? Check. A fearsome reputation? Check. I mean, traders and villagers flee in terror whenever they see my raiding party approaching, but to the nobility, I am nothing more than a mere annoyance. It's time to prove them wrong and put the fear of the drowned god in them. Before I march to war, first order of business is recalling my innate talents for recruiting gangs of bandits to my side. Back in the day, I was Lord Blacktyde's best recruiter, roaming the countryside looking for rough lads who wouldn't mind putting their talents for violence to good use in our employ. Wait, you're confused about Lord Blacktyde? You thought that was me? No, Blacktyde is not my actual name. I'm just a commoner of low birth who simply served under House Blacktyde and thus bear its name, though I suppose I also carry its banner now. Well, technically this isn't the banner of House Blacktyde. Our galley was flying Greyjoy colors when we sailed off, but, you know, shipwrecked, flotsam, torn sails. I simply recovered one of the Kraken's tentacles and fashioned a serpent out of it. Supposed that was common knowledge, which is why I haven't explained it till today. Ancient history by now, although I suppose that's how it works. You pay money to the arena master and he'll listen to you ramble about your glory days, and as you talk, you remember what you used to know. A couple of days after my therapy session, I went to a nearby village and began plundering it, until a southern Imperial lord rode to its defense. Because I knew I could defeat him, I left the village and pretended to retreat through the forest, until my party regained its speed, at which point I turned around and caught Archon Temion in my trap. The fight was nothing special, you know, standard procedure. You've heard it 100 times. I personally injured 2 enemies and then descended from the saddle to fight this Imperial legionary one-on-one, and I have to commend him for holding his own until my men closed in and ruined the fun. I wonder who would have won the duel if not for that intervention. And while the fight itself was a bit stale, the loot was anything but, as I obtained a cataphract helmet worth 40,000, a legionary chainmail worth another 20k, as well as a noble horse, among many other great pieces of equipment that were either gifted to my companions or sold for profit. 31,000 to be exact, and that's just one battle. Since I've arrived on this continent, I've taken a lot of really bad decisions, but taking the time to regain my raiding knowledge was the best choice I've ever made. I also gained another 9 grand in ransom for Temion and his surviving men. This trend of obtaining high-value loot and prisoners will continue for the remainder of the chapter, so I hope I can stop myself from mentioning it each and every time. In fact, I got another 24,000 shortly after departing from Zeonica because another Imperial Lord, Pagarios, crossed the path of my greatly superior force. I didn't even bother joining that fight myself. My men took care of everything. But fighting the Southern Empire is not high on my priority list. They never bothered me much, unlike the Northern Empire or the Sturgians. In fact, every time I tried venturing through the Northlands, their lords cornered me like a pack of rabid dogs. I had to sacrifice a lot of my men to make my escape, and they must be avenged. As I made my way north, I bolstered my ranks with fresh blood from each of the villages we passed through, and just as I entered Sturgia, I noticed a boyar and his retinue pass through. Not on my watch. I wasted no time in chasing Galden and his 50 soldiers, but he reacted quickly and took shelter in the formerly Battanian Flintog castle. So I walked away and allowed his grace to advance further into his homeland, so that I may catch him before he runs back into a friendly settlement. This was another battle that I refused to join because my fighters had everything under control. 7 of the weakest ones have lost their lives, but I don't consider that to be a big loss. If anything, calling the weak makes the whole group stronger. After looting the battlefield, we made our way to the nearest village where we convinced the locals to volunteer some lads for our gang. They refused, the militia was taught some manners, and those boys eventually joined us. I also obtained a shield that's valued at 3,000 dinars, which is strangely expensive, considering these were villagers we just fought. Not that I mind. We then made our way to Seonon, not before conscripting some lads from another village that was in our path. Once in town, I paid a visit to the tavern, where I ransomed the captive Sturgians and recruited a bunch of mercenary ladies. Apparently, a sisterhood of some sort made its way to Calradia a few weeks ago, and now they sell their murderous services to the highest bidder. Their lack of helmets worries me, but thanks to their crossbows, they can stay far away from the front line and avoid taking an axe to the skull. Incoming projectiles may still be a problem, but who knows, maybe they're lucky. At the very least, their presence is good for party morale, though I'll have to chop off some hands if my men get grabby. Just as I was leaving the city, Boyar Lek of Clan Vagiroving set his eyes upon my party and began his pursuit, seeking justice for the crimes I have committed against Skyrim and her people, but upon realizing he's outnumbered, he tried fleeing towards his allies. As you can see, his attempt was unsuccessful, but because his 85 soldiers are almost on par with my 132, I decided to enter the fray and personally lead the troops. Not much for me to do other than make sure my men keep a cool head and don't break formation. Perhaps I could also get a few kills here and there, take some pressure off of them. The terrain was great, large hill for my archers to sit on top of, while my infantry could hold them at the base and the cavalry's doing its thing. This battle wasn't much different from all the others I've fought throughout my career in Calradia, but it had some interesting moments. The first among them was when one of these sturdy Sturgians survived my couched lance, which is strong enough to kill a man 5 times over. Others would not be as lucky as him. Another interesting thing that happened was the enemy infantry going towards my cavalry and unknowingly opening themselves to being flanked by my footmen, while arrows rained down upon them. I also had a brief duel with a fellow raider who eventually fell to my axe, and at some point I even got knocked off my horse and had to fight on foot. Soon as I killed the rider who dismounted me, I committed an act of grand theft equite and prepared to continue the fight, but before I realized it, 'twas already over. Not the most exciting battle, I must admit, but I don't raid for entertainment. I do it for profit, and this time, it was quite profitable. However, it's not all about the money. I'm pretty sure Lek Boy would have fetched a nice ransom, but instead of capturing him, I decided to let him go in order to improve my standings with his clan. As we were resting and recovering in town, another opportunity to do just that came to my doorstep. Lek's wife and the Empress's daughter, Ira, showed up to take vengeance for the Sturgians I have murdered. When she saw that she's outclassed, she attempted to run, but to no avail. However, because it was late at night, I decided to let her go. But I did not want her returning to Sturgia, so I went in front of her to make her run the other way, and as soon as dawn broke, I caught her again and she got challenged to fisticuffs. Like all my recent battles, this one was not overly exciting, although it had its moments. I skewered a few enemies with my spear, and then... it was at this moment Balon didn't realize he done fucked up. As I turned my head to take a gander at my infantry and tell them to charge, a horseman pricked me with his lance and put me out of commission for the rest of the fight. Without my enlightened guidance, my men descended into barbarism, and all they were capable of was mindless violence. In the end, 73 of them have fallen to Ira's 88, 38 of which would never get back up ever again. As for the leaders of both sides, both lied flat on their backs, sweaty, exhausted, and unconscious after a hard day of fighting. When it was all said and done, I let her go and grabbed my share of the loot, which contained some expensive weapons, as well as a helmet that's worth 15,000 dinars. I briefly considered giving it to one of my compas, but in the end, I decided to just sell it. When I returned to Seonon to sell the loot and ransom my captives, I ran into a self-proclaimed connoisseur of horseflesh, and because I think we can be good friends, I took him under my wing. His scouting skill could prove useful, even though I already have a tracker with me. Maybe I'll just give him the boot if someone more interesting comes along. I also bought a round of drinks for my men, which slightly improves their morale for a few days, but I was now ready for the next step in my journey, going away from Sturgia and into Vlandia to look for some sea raiders to add to my gang. I didn't reset my skill for nothing. On my way there, I noticed some merchants who got lost and decided to lead them down the right path. Right into a forest where I easily caught them, fought them, and claimed a decent chunk of loot. From here I'd go north in search for more recruits, and after making a few stops in the Vlandian cities, selling bits of my cargo, I eventually found a forest bandit hideout that unfortunately had no roaming gangs around that could be recruited. No matter. I would assault the camp at night, equip a mace, and give these lads a few mighty wallops that they'll never forget for the rest of their short lives. When the boss confronted me, I dueled him and taught him the virtue of humility. In time, he would join my crew, along with the lads who watched the fight, as well as those whose teeth I knocked out prior to the duel. But even nicer than the future conscripts was the fine steel broadsword that I found, which is worth 12,000 dinars and is better than anything I've ever had. Claimed. A couple of days after attacking this hideout, I actually ran into a pretty large gang of sea raiders who were given a choice between joining my crew or making a donation. They chose the first option, and just like that, my party was now full, although not with the highest quality warriors. So I spent a few extra days chasing a few more gangs of raiders and having them replace my weakest fighters. At some point I even engaged a group of looters who really wanted to join up. But their wish was incompatible with my desire to train my combat skills in a safe environment. This did not go perfectly, I wasted a lot of time chasing after them, but regardless of the mistakes I've made, this training session went very well, and I not only improved my athletics and swordsmanship, but also gained a new level, and when I was done, I set course back to Sturgia, intent on beating a few more lords and eventually bringing this conflict to an end. Before I even set foot in their territory, Boyar Vashorki crossed my path and my men crossed his men from the list of people that are currently alive. Then they brought me my rightful share of the loot, which contained a chainmail for my horse. That's some good stuff. Then I went to the nearest town, completed some transactions, conscripted more people from Flintolg, and then ran into another boy, Yar, and put his soldiers to the sword. Soon after, I did the same to one of their caravans, and because I needed to call more lords to me, I began raiding one of their villages. Someone did come to defend this settlement, but before I could catch him, another lord showed up and I was forced to tactically retreat back to Botania. As I was making my escape, I noticed an army of Vlandians laying siege to Flintolg Castle, so I decided to bide my time and wait for the Sturgians to engage them in a fight, at which point, me and my 140 raiders would show up to the Reds' defense. That would be my final battle against the fish people, after which I'd look for a wealthy lord to buy my peace. For now, the Blues were more focused on chasing me than defending their lands, so I had to run into a friendly town. Soon as it was safe to come out, I went back to Flintolg Hill from where I would observe the hostilities, but as soon as they saw me, the boyars began chasing me once more, and as I was running towards Seonon, my path got blocked by Grand Prince Raganvad himself. Under normal circumstances, I'd be worried, but despite being outnumbered, I had full confidence that I could defeat him. What I feared was that my victory would be Pyrrhic at best, and after careful consideration, I decided that the damage I've done to Sturgia was enough, and now it's time for peace. So I made Raganvad an offer. Give me all you've got and I'll spare your soldiers and the rest of your people from this day until the day you foolishly declare war on me again. If he refused this offer, I simply would have broken his army and continued my hostilities until I was handed a handsome ransom, but he was reasonable. He didn't give me everything, but for 56k and a couple of horses, I agreed to leave him be. And so, peace with Sturgia was achieved, on my own terms. It's a bit of a shame. I would have liked the war to continue for a little while longer so I could claim some of their armor for myself, but I've got other goals left to achieve. I'm still at war with two empires, a Khanate and a Sultanate. I'm sure to obtain some better gear from them. For now, I had one more objective left to accomplish. Remember when I allowed Ira and her husband to go free instead of capturing them? I did that because Lek has a nice sister, an unmarried maiden who might make a great wife for me one day, Zvana. And not only is she a good match, but also a fierce warrior who can probably carve people up almost as good as me. She unfortunately resides in Urikskala Castle, which is on the opposite end of Sturgia, so I'd have to spend a few days to make my way there. As I set off towards my destination, I noticed the Vlandian army from earlier getting swarmed by what looks to be the entire population of Sturgia. Nothing I can do for them now. In my path I also ran into some decently sized gangs of raiders who sadly could not be accommodated into my crew, so I decided to beat them up and steal their stuff. Got a large bag of harpoons from that, which I put to good use against another party of looters that I used as training dummies. Not long after that, I've finally arrived to my destination and paid a visit to Zvana. After demonstrating my valor as a warrior for beating her brother and his wife, as well as my mercy for allowing them to walk away unscathed, Zvana's body language suggested that she's into me, but I'd rather play it safe and give her a small gift before I make my intentions known. I'm a handsome devil, according to her. Well, this confirms my suspicions. She really is into me, but I still have a chance to mess it up. Anyway, we talked for a bit. She asked about my travels and the people I have met, as well as my plans for the future. I have told her all about that, and it would appear that we're 100% compatible. But we need to go on another date before we decide to spend the rest of our lives together. Whether she'll agree to my proposal remains to be seen in the next chapter. For now, let's see what we've accomplished in these last couple of months. In terms of money, I added another 250,000 dinars to my bank account, and that's without bullying any other traders into paying me my fair share. I just took whatever they offered me, no questions asked. I also upgraded almost all of my arsenal. Got a badass cataphract helmet, a shiny new sword, and I even found a battle standard. First time in my life I see one of these. I assume they're great for my party's morale. I also greatly improved the strength of my warband by adding more bandits to my ranks. May those we lost along the way feast with the drowned god. They served him well by serving me well. Last but not least, I put the fear of the drowned god into the Sturgians and forced them to pay me to prevent further devastation. And with that, I believe we are done for today. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.